Hello, everyone. I'm Dylan Burns. I'm an assistant professor of the history of esotericism and late antiquity here at the University of Amsterdam. It is with great pleasure that I am able to host today for our series on the Platonisms of late antiquity, Professor Jay Bregman of the University of Maine. Jay needs no introduction, but I will quickly point to some of his best known achievements, beginning with his pioneering book on Synesius of Cyrene, philosopher bishop, published in 1982 in the prestigious series Transformations of the Classical Heritage from University of California Press. Jay has also written significant articles on Julian the Emperor, and among my favorites are his pieces on the reception of Platonism and Neoplatonism, particularly in 19th and 20th century literature, things like the American Transcendentalists. I'll never forget that it was Jay who pointed out to me for the first time at the ISNS in 2003 that Starbuck in Moby Dick is quoting Plotinus. Indeed, Melville was into Neoplatonism. But seriously, Jay has done a lot to show how Platonism came into literature and philosophy of modern culture. And this is really pioneering work, actually, for the reception history of late ancient Platonism. I'm delighted that he is then able to join our series. And today he will tell us about Harmonics, Theurgy, and Syncretism in the De Nuptiis Philologiae et Mercurii of Martianus Capella. Thank you so much, Jay.
Thank you for that introduction, Dylan. Very good to see you. I hope I can live up to it. Okay. Martianus Capella's Marriage of Philology and Mercury is a Neoplatonic allegory of the human soul's ascent through the cosmos to the noetic plane and beyond. It is also an allegorical presentation of the 7 liberal arts, devoting a chapter to each of them. The work combines Greek harmonics and cosmic music, theurgy, and religious syncretism. In this presentation, I will address questions of harmonic and cosmic musical principles, Neoplatonic allegorical principles, Theurgic and syncretistic principles. We know next to nothing about the life of Martianus, save that he was a North African from Carthage who wrote a very influential book, The Marriage of Philology and Mercury. The work is a fantastic Neoplatonic allegory of the search for a bride for Mercury, god of eloquence. The gods choose philology, whose ascent from earth through cosmos is also a parable of the alienated human soul's voyage from the shadows to the light of truth. The gathering of the wedding guests and finally the entertainment at the marriage, which follows the allegorical drama of books 1 and 2, the subsequent 7 books are devoted to the 7 liberal arts. Each book consists of a discourse presented by each of them personified. Book 9 is Harmony's discourse, which changes the traditional order in which astronomy comes last because of the significance of music in Martianus' scheme. Traditionally, Martianus was thought to have been active between 410 and 439, but arguments for a later date are reasonable. Chadwick considers him to be a Theurgic Neoplatonist. He suggests the dates in the 460s or 70s. Schanzer argues for an even later date during the 470s and 480s. In the 470s, in the shadow of Arian Catholic controversies, an African crypto-pagan influenced by currents of thought from Athens could celebrate intellectual mysteries in comparative peace. The allegories from books 1 and 2 are important for establishing Martianus' Neoplatonic Chaldean framework and symbolism. The setting is a defectus oraculum. Apollo no longer answers at his decaying shrines. The work then may be viewed as a reconnection to the old gods and a religious revival in a concrete contemporary sense. Mercury has been frustrated in his attempts to marry. Virtue advises consulting Apollo. The god favors Philology, who has knowledge of the heights of heaven and the depths of the underworld. Mercury, Virtue, and Apollo ascend through the cosmos, accompanied by the music of the spheres. Juno is convinced by Apollo's arguments. Jupiter is skeptical. Athena proposes that a decision will be aided by a council of the gods. They convene. Jupiter assents to the marriage on condition that Philology be granted deification. Philology is apprehensive that Mercury's fiery domain will consume her. She is reassured when she calculates the numbers of Mercury and herself. The former reduces to 3, the latter to 4, equal to the harmonious number 7. Following this is the preparation of a theurgic vestal containing sympathetic stones and herbs to protect her against supernal fires and the presence of the gods. Wedding preparations are accompanied by the muses singing hymns. Before Philology steps into the carriage prepared for her voyage, she spits up a stream of writings. Then she drinks the egg-like cup of immortality and begins her ascent. The carriage is borne by effort, love, attention, and vigilance. Gerst suggests that the cup consumed by Philology probably corresponds to Jupiter's engraved sphere, described below. The egg may well also stand for the Orphic egg, which in late antiquity was portrayed on the Greek imperials, local coinage, as an ovoid beetle surrounded by a snake, which had solar connotations. Thus, it could be harmonized with the solar theology of Macrobius and co., which was of major importance to pagan henotheism, omnes dii ad solem referunt, especially for its conflict with rising Christianity. Martianus' syncretism is inclusive and universal. He mentions old Roman gods, which is perfectly in accord with the Emperor Julian's theology, in which Romulus is an avatar and the city of Rome itself is, from beginning to end, Hellenic. His Eastern syncretism is analogous to his fellow North African and significant influence Apuleius, as well as comparable with the universal syncretism of the Neoplatonists, including Proclus, who was a priest of the religion of the world, so to speak. He mentions Isis, Serapis, Osiris, Mithras, Typhon, Attis, Libyan Ammon, and Adonis of Byblos in the same verse as Sol and Apollo. Mercury's connection with the nous of Jupiter provides him with a unique knowledge of the number of the gods. Philology can anticipate everything which is permitted the gods to foreknow. In the Neoplatonic interpretation of Gersh, Mercury and Philology symbolize the divine and human intellects and their marriage. Jupiter traces out a kind of sphere engraved with multiple variety. It has been compounded from all the elements. On it with the entire heaven, the number of the air, the seas, and the diversity of the earth, all types of living creatures in both species and genus. This sphere seemed to be a kind of image or idea of the world. Philology ascends through the cosmos to the conclave of the gods by intervals of a semitone through the planetary spheres and 1.5 tones to the sun's circle. Martianus, to my knowledge, is the only ancient author who includes the exact musical intervals involved in the soul's ascent, where she sees a fiery ship emblazoned with the images of a cat, symbol of the moon, a lion of the sun, a crocodile, symbol of time, finally beyond the planets by 1 and 1.5 tones to the fixed star's circle and praise to the sun, then praise to the invisible Father. The carriage represents the Neoplatonic vehicle of the soul, the ochema pneuma, which accompanies the soul on its ascent through the cosmos to the ether. It is a ship that the soul mounts upon its entrance into the cosmos, enabling union with the body. In actual union, it becomes the faculty of imagination, fantasia, excuse me, the connecting link between the noetic and sensible realms and basis for sense perception and consciousness. It resides in the interior of the body, that is the head, and controls the living being from a fortress, acropolis. Not subject to time, noetic events are reflected in the pure pneuma and form veritable dream images. When the soul has departed from the physical body, the pneuma accompanies it. For Synesius, the imagination becomes the first body of the soul. Porphyry's ethereal body corresponds to the rational soul, and after the soul descends further, the imagination corresponds to the solar body. In the ascent, the vehicle of Porphyry disperses at the ether. It is unclear whether Synesius is closer to Porphyry or Iamblichus on this. For the latter, the vehicle is itself ethereal and therefore not subject to destruction of any kind. We should assume that Martianus follows Iamblichus and co. Philology's ascent fits perfectly with the cosmic journeys of the soul in Hermetic, Chaldean, and Neoplatonic texts, such as Plato's myth of air, the model and archetype of all cosmic musical journeys, Cicero's dream of Scipio, Plutarch's vision of Timarchus, in which the spheres all make music and harmonize with a gentle whirring sound caused by their movement through the ether. In the Phaedrus, Plato says, the soul which has seen most of truth shall come to birth as a philosopher, or beauty lover, or fervent musician. This sentiment is reflected by Plotinus, who says, beauty is also found in sounds, for songs and rhythms are also beautiful. Plato knows that music is powerful. Education in music is most sovereign because more than anything else, rhythm and harmony find their way into the inmost soul. It penetrates the center of the soul and gains possession of the soul in the most energetic fashion. Ethos depends on modes, harmoniae, no wild aule, only the lyre and the two modes that enhance character, Phrygian for sophrosine and Dorian for courage and martial virtues. The Greek Dorian scale and tuning intervals were different from ours. The mode prescribed for Plato's city would not sound like our tempered Dorian mode, comprising the piano's white keys D to D, one octave higher. Famously represented by Miles Davis' Dorian mode composition, So What? Plato's narrow puritanical view can lead to musical fascism if taken literally. 60s rock anarchists were fond of a quotation they attributed to Plato, which they rendered as, when the mode of music changes, the walls of the city shake. Unlike Plato, they wanted to change the mode. To achieve euphrosyne in souls as opposed to hedone, create sound patterns that imitate the harmonia of the world soul, in our music lexicon, a scale. Through rational harmonia, irrational images in the soul are transformed. We cannot hear or sing the cosmic music from the world soul and of its bodily organs, the stars and planets, but a mind trained in mathematical harmonies can grasp its nature and significance. And now a quote from Timaeus. Of sound and hearing, once more the same account may be given. They are a gift from heaven for the same intent and purpose. That part of music that is serviceable with respect to the hearing of sound is given for the sake of harmony, whose notions are akin to the revolutions of the soul within us, given by the muses to him who commerce with them, is guided by intelligence, not for the sake of irrational pleasure, but as an ally against the inward discourse that has come into the revolution of the soul to bring it into order and consonance with itself. Rhythm also was a succor bestowed upon us by the same, because in the most part of us, our condition is lacking in measure and poor in grace. Excuse me. Compare this to Pythagorean music therapy. Pythagoras was of the opinion that music contributed greatly to health. He called the medicine which is obtained through music by the name of purification. He placed the center of a person who played the lyre and seated in a circle around him those who were able to sing. And thus, when the person in the center struck the lyre, those who surrounded him sung certain paeans, through which they were seen to be delighted and to become elegant and orderly in their manners. In the myth of air at the end of the Republic, Plato depicts the music of the spheres, and on each of its circles there was seated a siren uttering a single sound in one pitch, but the whole of them, being 8, composed a single harmony. And sitting, each on a throne, the daughters of necessity, the fates, in white vestments and having crowns on their heads, singing the harmony of the sirens, Lachesis singing the past, Clotho the present, and Atropos the future. Cicero's answer to the air at the end of his On the Republic, Scipio's dream, presents an inquiry while elevated among the spheres of Scipio Africanus minor to Scipio Africanus major. What is this great and pleasing sound that fills my ears? That, replied my grandfather, is a concord of tones separated by unequal, but nevertheless carefully proportioned intervals caused by the rapid motion of the spheres themselves. The high and low tones blended together produce different harmonies. Outermost sphere, the star bearer, gives forth a higher pitch tone, whereas the lunar sphere, the lowest, has the deepest tone. The 8 spheres, 2 of which move at the same speed, produce 7 tones. This number being, one might almost say, the key to the universe. Gifted men imitating this harmony on stringed instruments and in singing have gained for themselves a return to this region. Plutarch's Tabarchus descended into the cave of Trophonius and experienced a cosmic vision where he heard from the spheres a musical whirring in the ether, the gentleness of the sound resulting from the harmony of all the separate sounds. In his ascension hymn, like Plutarch, Synesius Christ reaches Aether, wise engenderer of harmony, who plays his 7-string planetary lyre, then ascends to the silent, timeless realm of Nous and reaches the spheres of pure intelligence. Plotinus now, notion of petitionary prayer. When a man prays to a heavenly body, some influence comes upon him from it, but the sun or another star does not hear him, and that which he prays for comes about because one part is sympathetic with another, just as in 1/10 strut of the vibration can even pass from one lyre to another, insofar as a sympathy exists. Then there is also one single harmony in the all, even if it is composed of opposites. And it is in fact composed of parts which are all alike and all akin, even when they are opposites. If the vibration in a lyre affects another by virtue of the sympathy existing between them, then certainly in the all there must be one melodic system. Plotinus' vision of the cosmic chorus confirms this view. For there is fitness and beauty in the whole only if each individual is stationed where he ought to be, the one who utters evil sounds in darkness and Tartarus. For there to make these sounds is beautiful, and this whole is beautiful. Not if each is Linus, but if each, by contributing his own sound, helps toward the perfection of a single melody, himself too sounding the note of life, but a lesser, worse, and more incomplete life. Just as in a panpipe, there is not one note only, but a note which is weaker and duller contributes to the melody of the whole panpipe. Because the melody is divided into parts which are not equal, and all the notes of the pipe are unequal, but the melody is complete, made up of all. So to the rational universal principle, that is, O logos, O pos, is one, but is divided into parts which are not equal. The salvific vision of the Hermetica, Poimandres 25, is reminiscent of the journey of philology. The soul ascends through the harmony, and then stripped of what was given energy by the harmony and clothed in his proper power, he enters the eighth sphere and can also hear the powers above the eighth sphere singing. And then the purified souls above the eighth sphere and the subject ascend to the Father. In turn, they are reborn in God. This is the happy end of those who have gained gnosis to become one with God. Iamblichus, ready to go a step further, corrects the assumption that divine possession is only a condition of body and psyche brought about by their native harmonic constitution. No, it is a direct meeting with the gods, such as the soul experienced before birth, that some of those who suffer a mental alienation energize enthusiastically on hearing cymbals or drums or a certain modulated sound, such as those who are possessed by Sabazius or inspired by the mother of the gods. That music is a motive of nature, is of a motive nature, and is adopted to excite the affections. The melody of pipes produces or heals the disordered passions of the soul, and by some melodies causes a Bacchic fury, but by others causes the fury to cease. An unstable and variable melody is adapted to ecstasies. All these appear to me to be adduced in a way foreign to enthusiasm. They are physical and human and a work of our art, but there are sounds and melodies consecrated and adapted to the gods. To such, the gods themselves become present. So whatever has but a casual similitude to directly participates of them. The whole principle and participation of it are supernally derived from the gods. Neither is it proper to say that the soul primarily consists of harmony and rhythm, for thus enthusiasm would be adopted to the soul alone. It is better to assert that the soul, before she gave herself to a body, was an auditor of divine harmony. When she proceeded into body and heard melodies that preserved the divine vestige of harmony. From them recollected divine harmony and as much as possible participates of it. Certain earthly melodies are imprinted with the signature of a deity who is present therein on the terrestrial plane. Thus, he distinguishes the merely psychological effects of music from the authentically spiritual ones, which alone are rightly designated as enthusiasm. Martianus gives music a most significant role in the marriage. Instrumental and vocal music adorn the ceremony. Allusions to theoretical music occur in the book on arithmetic. The description of the trees in Apollo's grove and in the ascent through the planetary spheres, as well as Harmony's long discourse in Book 9. Harmony enters moving between Apollo and Athena, in her right hand a circular shield within her circles, interwoven with remarkable configurations. The encompassing circles were attuned to each other, and from the circular chords there poured forth a concord of all the modes. No lyre or lute or tetrachord appeared on that circular shield, yet the strains coming from it surpassed those of all musical instruments. A symphony swelled from the shield. All other music, which by contrast with its sweetness sounded dissonant, became silent. Jupiter and the other divinities recognized the grandeur of the exalting melody. Recognizing the grandeur of the exalted melodies, pouring forth in honor of a certain secret fire and inextinguishable flame, reverenced the ancestral song by one, and one by one arose in homage to extra-mundane intelligence. The divine beings revere the harmony of nous. Secret fire and indistinguishable flame are evidence of Martianus' use of the Chaldean oracles. A long hymn to Jupiter and a new melody and meter follows. I worship you, O Jupiter, resounding with heavenly song. Mind, which you instill with heavenly force, revolves the cosmos in ceaseless whirl. Hail, for you our lyre is attuned. For you the gamut of our song results in double diapason. That is 2 octaves, which comprise the greater perfect system, the basis of Greek music. Each octave is a combination of the intervals of a 4th and a 5th, and the notes within these intervals form tetrachords. Harmony then discourses neoplatonically. From the time that the limitless universe of the ineffable Creator begot me as the twin sister of heaven, I have not forsaken numbers. I follow the courses of the sidereal spheres and the whirling motions of the entire mass, assigning tones to the swiftly moving celestial bodies. But when the monad and first hypostasis of intellectual light was conveying to earthly habitations souls that emanated from their original source, I was ordered to descend with them. It was I who designated the numerical ratios of perceptible motions and the impulses of perfect will, introducing restraint and harmony into all things, a subject which Theophrastus elaborated on as a universal law. I revealed the concepts of my art to men. I demonstrated the use of stringed instruments at Delphi through the Delians' Cythera, flutes blown by the Tritonian and Marcius. Others blew on reed pipes, hymns to the heavenly deities. The remainder of the hymn is a compendium of famous myths, cosmology, ritual, and even music therapy. For example, military. Cretans engaged the enemy to the strains of the cithara, Spartans to the sound of the aulos, Amazons to the tune of reed pipes. One of them, who came to Alexander hoping to conceive by him, was given a flute and went away elated. In peacetime, in many Greek polis, laws and public decrees were recited to the strains of the cithara. This is the description of the Greek polis as the aesthetic state. Music therapy. Harmony says, I recited chants that have had a therapeutic effect upon deranged minds and alien bodies. I have restored the mad to health through consonance, which treatment Asclepiades, the physician, learned from me. He healed with the trumpet. Patients who were stone deaf, he healed with the trumpet patients who were stone deaf. And Theophrastus used the flute with mentally disturbed patients. Herophilus checked the pulse of his patients by comparing rhythms. In Book 1, Martianus describes the natural music arising from a grove of Apollo in Chiara near Delphi. Quote, a sweet music arose from the trees, a melody arising from their contact as the breeze whispered through them. For the crests of the great trees were very tall, and because of the tension reverberated with a sharp sound. But whatever was close and near to the ground with drooping boughs shook with the deep heaviness of sound, while the trees of middle size and their contacts with each other sang together in fixed harmonies of the ratios 2-1, 3-2, 4-3, and 9-8. Without discrimination, although semitones came in between. So it happened that the grove poured forth with melodious harmony, the whole music and song of the gods. Excuse me. The intervals represented here are the octave, the perfect fifth, the fourth, and the seventh, leading back up to the tonic. Martianus continues, as a Silene explained this, virtue learned that in heaven, also in the same way, the spheres either produce harmony or join in the accompaniments. So it is not strange that the grove of Apollo should be full of harmony when the same God in the sun modulates the spheres of the heavens also. This passage implies that the earthly grove of Apollo at Kira is an epiphany of the God down here. It is thus a theurgic sacred space in the Amblician tradition. To such adaptations of melodies to the gods become present insofar as it is possible in the earthly sphere. And just a brief conclusion. By the age of Plato, the diatonic became the generally preferred musical genus. Proclus says as much in his commentary on the Timaeus. But as there are three genera, each of which is a certain division of the tetrachord, Plato appears to have used the diatonic genus alone. He seems to have assumed this genus is more grand, simple, and generous than the other genera. Hellenistic and late antique music theorists and composers worked from musical theories established during the classical period. The two most important competing schools were the theoretical noetic, Platonic Pythagorean, and the empirical intuitive of the peripatetic followers of Aristoxenos. Martianus introduced the deified mortals Orpheus and Aristoxenos playing lyres, representing the two main factions of Greek music theory, and in his work reconciling them. Martianus' religious syncretism is inclusive. His Eastern syncretism is close to that of Apuleius. It is comparable with the syncretism of Proclus and the later Neoplatonists. In his Neoplatonic allegory of the ascent of the soul, Martianus follows the polyvalent allegorical principles of Porphyry and the Theurgic Neoplatonists, for whom gods and myths, disturbing on the surface, esoterically represent noetic forms and processes. Mercury and Philologiae symbolize the divine and human intellect and their marriage. Martianus uniquely applies Greek harmonic principles and intervals to the steps of philology's ascent through the spheres. The natural music, quote unquote, in the grove of Apollo suggests the theurgic presence of the god. Harmony's discourse on Greek music covers the modes and categories of Greek music. His work displays a good grasp of theurgic and harmonic principles. Okay, sorry, I went a little bit over time.
Thank you so much, Jay.
Thanks.
And it was not over time, it was just right. I was tickled pink that you worked Miles Davis in there because I forgot to mention as I introduced you that you are also a noted authority on the history of jazz music. And who better to tell us about the harmonics than an expert on jazz? Questions and comments for Jay Bregman? If I could then kick things off, I suppose.
I have a.
Oh, yes, please.
Hi, Jay. It's Robert.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Yeah, thank you very, very much. I was thinking of Martianus And in the DN at 1, 12 to 13, he makes, as you mapped out, a cosmological parallel between the ordering of the universe and the harmonic organization of a musical scale. So I wondered, and this is not an easy question to answer. What does a metaphysical harmonic sound like? I mean, Dylan sort of
what does it sound like down here?
to this, but is there some analogy in modern jazz? Does a metaphysical harmonics sound like? If we just tune the ears, is there any analogy that you can make to contemporary music or classical composition? Because, you know, that's the interstices where the two of you, well, the two of your sides or multiple sides come together. So I'm just wondering what it might sound like.
Great question,
Yeah,
Rob.
okay, well, there have been attempts in classical. Scriabin had this chord called the mystic chord, which has certain intervals which somehow give you a sense of something behind the sound, something transcendent. And actually, strangely, Sun Ra adopted it also in his jazz. I think modes also, when you play modally, modes connect with all the musics of the world.
Okay.
So when people like Coltrane played modal, it did certain things with it that took you somewhere. And is, well, I don't know if that's is exactly metaphysical, but Willie Ruff, who was a student of Hindemith and a theoretician and a Pythagorean and also a jazz player, made a recording of the music of the spheres, so to speak, by using Kepler's harmony of the world and Kepler's very different ideas about the tonal relations of the planets, and put it out on this Kepler records. So it does have a sound of cosmic music. That's all I can think of right now.
Okay, just to follow up, this is for the more historically minded. It struck me that Plato's sirens were replaced by muses. And when did that occur? I was thinking it's a lost commentary on the Republic by Porphyry, where that may have occurred. But there seems to be, what you're mapping is a unique transmission of the musical version of Plato's image, which resurfaces in Capella's 1, 12 to 13. So in other words, when were the sirens replaced by the muses? And what results is sort of a musical version of
yeah, I don't think I can answer that. I've never researched.
Plotinus's cosmology, I guess. So that's sort of, does that make
Could
sense?
be, yeah.
Thank you.
Great questions, Rob.
Thank
you
you.
so much. If I may follow up on one of your answers quickly, Jay, is this, was it early or late Sun Ra who adopted these tones, like Jazz and Silhouette or Space is the Place era? They're pretty different, you know?
I think it was, it might have been the Space is the Place era.
Yeah, I would think so.
I have the recording of it, but I have to check how late it was.
I will follow up on you with that. I'd like to hear
Certainly
it.
by this, when he was at Berkeley around early 1970s, And he gave lectures and he was talking about that. I think that might be around the time he was doing that.
Fascinating. More questions and comments for Jay Bregman? One thing that I was wondering about is the prevalence of speculation or investigation into the theurgic properties of music within the Neoplatonic tradition. You talk some about Plotinus's reflections, which are very brief. My impression is that Martianus is where we find a full-blown reflection. I think of some parts of the response to Porphyry, Book 1, where Iamblichus reflects on the effects that playing drums and making cymbals can have. Actually, in kind of the negative properties of ritual can be efficacious in his response to Porphyry. But could you tell us a little bit more about the general reflections on the property of playing music in the later Platonic tradition, more Martianus's time and afterwards? What's the context for his reflections, and who is he responding to, if not simply Platonic Pythagorean and peripatetic models? Are these authorities from way before, or are these ciphers for anyone more present?
Oh, okay. Well, first, a lot of what he did, of course, is this pedantic copying of authors like Varro and Aristides Quintilianus. The second part of Harmonics discourse is basically that theory, either summarized or copied. In his own time, I guess we don't know exactly what the rituals were, but he may very possibly have had connections with Athens. And but I don't think there are any examples. I think the examples of something like that are in the Renaissance, with Ficino's Lyre and hymns to Orpheus and attempts at sympathetically attuning to the cosmos one's entire life. And I guess we don't have the exact, I don't think we have any examples of Ficino's actual music, do we? I don't know, Angela Voss is a great expert on this, and Stephen Gersh, but also, I guess the closest thing to it would be the Florentine Camerata, the Intermedi, that were ostensibly Neoplatonic.
Yeah.
And then also somehow led to opera. But as far as rituals, I guess the closest is the Renaissance Italians, the Platonic Academy.
We get Gersh to do a follow-up on this. We have a question from Valerie Reyes.
Thank you, Jay. You've actually preempted my question, because I was going to ask what happened in the Renaissance, because Martianus Capella, as I understand it, had quite a continuous following during the Middle Ages. And we don't hear much talk of him in Renaissance scholarship. And yet, clearly, there are resonances in Ficino, who begins to pick up some of the fascinating things you've been saying about the harmonies and the intervals. Was there, you pointed to Ficino, I can't think of any specific place where he refers to Martianus Capella, but I'm sure Stephen and Angela Voss would know. Can you see any more about his general reception in the Renaissance period?
I think there are some mentions of him in connection with those fantastic shows that they you know, as I said, the intermediate, or they've been compared, but
Mm,
I don't really know any other specifics. I know some of the medieval,
mm.
you know, Scotus Origina and the School of Short, but I actually, you're the Renaissance expert, so I would defer to you on that.
Well, I'm intrigued to find out more. Thank you.
Okay, and nice to see you.
And you.
Another paper that we should invite for a follow-up. Valerie, yes. Further questions and comments for Jay Bregman? Anne, are you raising your pen? Yes. You're still muted.
Muted.
Yes.
Is it all right?
Yes. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It was a fascinating conference. Perhaps we can look at Francis Yates' books on, for example, Giordano Bruno, and the importance of Hermetism in Renaissance. Hermetism that influence the Platonicians, I think, and there is some links with this theurgic rituals, perhaps. I'm not sure. Francis Yates.
Yes, I know. It's been a long time since I read her book. But
Giordano Bruno and Hermetism in Renaissance, and the link with Platonism.
Right, so
philosophers.
Right, so I'm not sure what.
It's a question.
I really don't know any specific connections beyond what I've mentioned. I mean, I'm not an expert on the Renaissance.
I understand.
Just know a few things.
It's a question for me too.
Oh, okay.
I will explore. I will.
Right, okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think it would be fair to guess that whatever reception of Martianus we would see in the Renaissance would be taking place among people interested in Hermes and perhaps identifying as Hermetists in some sense.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. Like
Valerie, does this sound right to you? They're certainly reading this, they would be reading this in terms of what we find about the spheres and poimandres, right? Yeah. Further questions and comments for Jay Bregman?
Well, I might have one.
Yes, Rob.
Yeah. As I remember, the upper planets produced harmonics. So how does Muse recognize the pitch familiar to her? So we have Polymenia, who recognizes the pitch of Saturn. This is my recollection of the text. So how would these muses possibly get it? Because we have Euterpe recognizes Jupiter, and all of this comes together and emphasis later in the Renaissance writers that we've been reflecting upon. So how does a muse recognize the pitch familiar to her, according to your source? Is that a fair question, or?
In Martianus, there's no mention of that.
Okay.
How a muse would recognize the pitch. I guess the muses are.
Well, the harmonics produced by the upper planets. Yeah. No sense of that at all.
Which planets are you talking about?
Well, let's just think of Saturn or Jupiter. All of these upper planets produce harmonics, so a muse is tuned into a particular
They're just tuned that
planet. So
way.
I'm
The
just
muses
wondering
are
how
tuned
that
to the-
happens.
I
That's
don't
all.
think
As a musician might now.
there's no separate, I don't think
Or
there's a separate.
did I get it completely wrong?
I still don't quite get what you mean. I think the muses are just tuned to their particular spheres. It's
Yeah,
not
but
as-
but
they
planets
were literally,
planets
they're not
control
literally-
certain spheres.
what?
Planets
don't
have aegis or control over certain spheres. So I'm just wondering, how do you know the pitch? I have this problem all the time. I have difficulty getting the pitch. So I'm just wondering how the muses might. That's all. It's very theoretical. It's not a historical
Well,
question.
I mean, the muses are tuned to the spheres. They're not really separate beings that have to figure out how to hear
Oh, okay.
a note, I would think. But anyway, it was all done theoretically. I mean, there were no sound realizations exactly
Okay.
of the spheres. It was all theoretical calculations of ratios
Yeah, I
and
got it.
motions of the planets and things like that. It's not the same. That's, musica mundana, not the
Right.
same as earthly music.
Gotcha.
But I don't,
So in
I
this
don't know
sense,
of any discussion of that.
Okay, thank you.
I guess practically speaking, Rob, this is the kind of music played on the kind of instrument that never needs to be stopped and retuned in between songs.
Sure.
You know,
Oh,
any further questions or
fair
comments
enough.
for Jay?
Fair enough.
With that, then, it is with pleasure and gratitude to Jay Bregman and Christoph Markschies that we adjourn this session of the Platonisms of late antiquity. Thanks to all of you for joining, and a special thanks to our speakers, Christoph and Jay, for their terrific papers.
Thank you for inviting me, and very good to see you, Dylan.
Good to see you, Jay.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. All the best.
Yeah,
Thank
take
you.
care.
Thank
Good to
you
see you,
very much.
Christoph. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christoph.
Thanks.